Now I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're like, is it deja vu? Is it that Viper guy again? Don't adjust your set. It is that Viper guy again, but this is a different podcast. I know. You just saw me about an hour ago, right? But we're back with another episode of VypDrive, and we got my man Gee in the back here, ready to rock and roll. But I'll give you guys a minute or two to file in. I think we got Bernard Freeman out there. What's up, Bernard? Got Joseph Hardison. What's up, Joseph? How you doing? Technically, T's in the building. Oh my goodness. What's up, man? Digital Slang. What's up, man? Jeff Hale. Appreciate you coming back, Jeff Hill. I appreciate you guys. That's right, man. Telling you, your boy stays busy. You're not kidding. Your boy stays busy. I got 2 podcasts today, 2 podcasts tomorrow, 2 podcasts on Wednesday. I mean, your boy is busy. Although tomorrow, I only have one of my podcasts, but I co-host the Painfully Honest Tech podcast, so I'll be co-hosting that podcast. Then I have my podcast right after I finish co-hosting the Painfully Honest Tech podcast. So yeah, your boy stays busy. But hey, it's fun. Hey, it's not work when you love doing what you're doing. I love talking to all these different creators and things like that. So yeah, man, I'm just doing my thing. I'm just doing my thing. So like I said, I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to file in. Then we'll bring man my dude, and we will begin another edition of VypDrive. Got to make sure you stay hydrated with all these podcasts. It's crazy. All right. All right, got 9 people up in here. Janoson's out there. Gwendolyn G. Hey, Gwendolyn, how you doing? How you doing? All right, so we got about 10 people in here. Let's go ahead and do the introduction, bring in my man, and we can go ahead and begin the podcast. So, this is VypDrive episode 127. Man, they are really piling up. And with 127, bring one of the top camera experts to the podcast. I know. It seems like I've had a lot of camera people on the podcast recently, but hey, it's cool. I'm friends with all types of creators on the platform. I happen to have a lot of camera creator friends, so that's cool. I don't know nothing about cameras, so I'll bring them all on to teach me different things about cameras, and it helped me learn. So I probably got another camera expert coming up next on VypDrive. He's here. He's ready. So let's start the podcast now. What's up, people? This your boy Viper, the man about tech, and welcome back to another episode of VypDrive. This is the podcast about tech, hosted by the man about tech. And tonight, as I just alluded to in my introduction, I have one of the top camera gear experts in YouTube coming to the podcast. The guy is a photography expert. He does product reviews, product demos. The dude talks about tech gear, gives you recommendations. This dude is a heavy hitter in the tech gear space. So let's bring in my man, Ziggy, aka Tech Gear Talk. What's up, bro? How you doing?
Man, how's it going? But thanks so much for having me on. You can't not be hyped after that intro.
Oh, you know how we do. You know how we do. Thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Super glad to be on. Excited to talk about cameras, talk about whatever. I'm ready.
Oh, let's go. So, first question I ask every first-time guest that comes to the podcast, Ziggy, what brought you to YouTube?
It's funny. I actually just recorded this video, but I haven't published it yet. A friend of mine actually showed me MKBHD's channel. And this was years ago. And he was before then, I didn't really watch YouTube for anything other than if I wanted to learn a new skill or something like that. I wouldn't spend time on the platform. So he showed me his channel and he was like, you could do that. Not as well, but you could do it. And I remember watching his video for the first time and I was like, wow, that's so good. Because really I had no concept of what it would take to do it or any of that stuff. So I just remember watching this video and just being blown away. So that's how I was introduced to the idea that this is even a thing I could do.
if you're gonna get an idea for starting a channel, that's a high bar to set when you watch that MKBHD content, man. Does this mean we can expect you to get a Canon R5 so you can start putting out that 8K content to get what's going on, man?
All right. So, I mean, there was only a matter of time until the R5 and the R6 came up with this.
Oh, I'm just curious. The people want to know.
So, I'm going to get one to review, but I don't know that I agree. I don't know that Canon did the right thing here. Like, so obviously we've got A7S III, R5. I think what happened was for all these years, for like the past, however many years, people are like, well, Sony's specs just blow Canon out of the water. And that's what people would focus on. And I think Canon like just overdid it. They were like, okay, well, fine. Then we're just going to try to like win the spec war. But I don't know that they did I don't know that what they came up with is really a good product at the end, because it's not really usable in the way that you're advertising it. Like, I think if they advertise it differently, there wouldn't be this much of a pushback. But I don't know. I don't know.
love how you said, I'm going to get one to review. Now, the average person might not know what that lingo means, but if you're a tech YouTuber, you know exactly what he's saying. When he said he's going to get one to review, that means when he's done reviewing it, it's going back. What that means?
Yeah, I mean, it means I'll get to borrow it and use it. And that's usually what I do. Like, unless I know ahead of time. And I mean, look, what I never do, I'll tell you right now, what I've never done is bought a product, reviewed it, and sent it back. Never.
Okay.
I have relationships right now where I can borrow stuff, so that's super helpful in that context. But otherwise, I mean, otherwise I just wouldn't get one, because I don't see that for what I do, it's not better than what I have. Let's just say it. So right now I'm shooting this on a C200, and I probably didn't get this camera for the reason that most people get this camera. It serves like very specific needs for me. And I'm also someone who prioritizes workflow and just ease of use over specs. So I don't shoot my videos in 4K even. I shoot my videos in 1080p and I upscale to 4K. So for me, it wouldn't make sense. Like recording limit alone would make it a camera that I wouldn't use over what I have. I mean, I can't believe there's a recording limit on it.
Wait. Talk about. See, this is the part where I learned something. You just said that you shoot your videos in 1080p and then you upscale them to 4K.
Yeah.
So when you put them out on YouTube, do they come out in 1080p or 4K on YouTube?
In 4K.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that because you shoot the video in 1080p and then upscale it to 4K, that means it probably upload faster to YouTube, right? Is that why you do that, or why do you do that exactly?
For a higher bit rate in terms of when YouTube serves the content. No, it doesn't upload faster. It uploads. I mean, it's interesting. The file size is not that different. I also have fiber, so like I upload huge files, and it's like
he doesn't count. He doesn't count.
I like seriously, like I'll upload like an 8 gig file. It's like a minute and a half. So that was I'm lucky. I mean, I remember when it just became available, and the first video I uploaded, I thought it broke. Like I thought something didn't work, because before it was like an hour and a half before. So I hit it, and then I went to do something else, and then I came back, and it was like, it's done. I'm like, well, it can't be done. And then I'm like sitting there, and then it's processing. So I was like, maybe, and then so the processing takes whatever, as long as it takes, but the upload it's lightning.
Okay, so why do you do that? Why do you film it at 1080p but upscale to 4K instead of just shooting in 4K?
Okay, so a number of reasons. Like up until now, I was using C100 Mark IIs, so they can't film in 4K. They can only
Okay.
film at 1080p. And even now, I still use 2 or sometimes 3 cameras. So I still use those 2 plus the C200. So it's still easier for me. I mean, I could start mixing, but truly for like what we're doing on YouTube, I don't see a huge advantage. And for me to then have to work and store larger files, I just don't see the benefit. Like, of course, is it sharper? Sure. Um, would I have some flexibility in terms of reframing? Some, but only if I delivered it in 1080p at the end anyway. So I haven't seen an advantage yet that's made it worthwhile for me to switch. Now, that might change over the next couple of years, but right now, I'm super happy with my
I have
workflow.
never heard that. Usually it's the other way around because I know personally I shoot in 4K, but then sometimes I upload in 1080p. I have never heard of somebody shooting in 1080p and upscaling to 4K instead of just shooting in 4K natively. That is very interesting. I get it, but
Yep.
it's interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, and again, like I said before, I didn't have the gear and I didn't invest in that gear because I'd have to give up some of the stuff that I really like. So like for example, just like basic things, my cameras have built-in ND filters. So I don't need an ND filter on the front. So if I want to shoot at 1.8 and there's plenty of light, I just have a little toggle. I go plus 2 stops, plus 4 stop, or 2, 4, or 6 ND on all 3 of these cameras. The other thing is XLR inputs right into the camera. So I record my audio right into now my C200 and before my C100. It's like no
Mhm.
adapters. There's nothing. I just plug it in. It gives it phantom power, and I'm ready to record. No
Nice.
recording limit because I actually started out. My first maybe like 10 videos were shot on 5D Mark II, one 5D Mark II and a 5D Mark III. And they obviously there's a recording limit, so I would always forget. I would always forget. I'd be recording, and then like 10 minutes after it stopped recording, I'm still rambling at the camera, and then realizing I have to shoot that whole section again. Um, so with these cameras, I have them all plugged in. They're all on AC power, no battery, and it's just easy. It's some of the stuff that you and I talked about right before we jumped on, like remove friction and make the
Mhm.
creative process as easy as possible. Sit down, turn stuff on, record, boom. There's like less in the way that way.
All right, so now I got to get into the heavy hitting part of the podcast here because you just told me that you shoot with a Canon C200, but I know you have Sony gear. So
Yep.
my question to you is, why are you shooting, or what? Why do you prefer? Well, it seems like right now, at least, why do you shoot with Canon gear over Sony gear right now?
Okay. So personally, I just
Mhm.
like the color out of the Canon cameras
Okay.
with a lot less processing. Like again, I'm just interested in doing something that's just easy. I want to get the content out there. I want to start editing. And for me, and I've shot some of my videos with the A6400. I've shot some of my videos with the M6 Mark II, just switching stuff around to see if people will notice and like, what looks better to me. And I always find that if I want to use Sony, up until now, I would always have to shoot in log and then grade it. And I don't necessarily always want to do that. And yes, I could create a LUT and then just reuse it. But with the A7 III, which I have, I still had the recording limit. So that wasn't going to be it. I still can't plug in an XLR mic directly into the camera. I don't have an ND filter. The other thing is because I started out on Canon, I have a ton of Canon lenses and they don't work on Sony with the Sigma MC11. They don't work on Sony for video. The autofocus will work for stills, but not for video. So I'd have to replicate or buy a whole new lens system, which, as I'm sure you know, like that's crazy. And
Mm-mm.
to try to maintain 2 lens systems, that's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Um, So, but man, that A7S3, it's got me thinking.
Yeah, you're thinking about it. How you thinking about it?
I'm not gonna lie. I was actually just talking to a friend of mine earlier today, saying, "Boy, that's like pretty close to a perfect camera."
Yeah.
It doesn't have all the things that my cinema cameras have, but it's also way more portable. So when I want to not shoot in here,
He's thinking about it. He might reconsider his take on the current situation here, y'all.
so notice I said I'm not buying an R5. I didn't say I'm not buying it.
Yep.
It is not on the record.
Our buddy Gerald Undone did a whole breakdown of the A7 III, and he called it damn near the perfect camera. And if it gets Gerald's approval, it's serious. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because of all the people that were on Twitter canceling their Canon R5 pre-order when that Sony A7 III dropped. Oh man, it's serious, man. That's a good one.
Man, and Canon sort of rode that wave for a while, right? Because before Sony sort of announced and released it, it was like Canon was getting all the hype. And now, all the overheat, like I can't worry about overheating. You've seen my videos; they're long. I don't want to sit there thinking like, oh, now I can't record anyway. Now, someone would say, well, you could still record in 1080p for as long as you want. And I just really think the way they marketed both of these new cameras it's just not ideal. That they are better than their previous cameras, and they do offer some advantages, but it sort of looks ridiculous when like the one thing you hype it up for, it can't really do.
Right. Gotcha.
I don't want 8K footage anyways. Get that off my hard drive immediately.
Yep. Shout out to the 14 of y'all that are watching the podcast live tonight with me and Tech Gear Talk. Thank you guys for rocking out each and every episode on the podcast. If you guys want to go check out his content, his channel link is in the description. So definitely go check him out. He is legit, especially if you're looking to learn about camera gear and how to use it and learning about your tech gear in general. Also, if you want to support the podcast, super chats are open. You can do that. You can also buy me a coffee if you don't want YouTube taking 30% of your super chat donation. The buy me a coffee link has just appeared in the chat, courtesy of Genosis. So thank you, Genosis. I appreciate you. None of the stuff is required. But if you are willing to contribute, anything that you're willing to contribute, greatly, greatly appreciate it. Shout out to those of y'all listening on audio only this week. Thank you for listening to another episode of VypDrive with me and Tech Gear Talk. If you want to go check out his content, his info will be in the show notes. Definitely go down there and check him out. He is legit. If you want to support or donate to the podcast, there is a buy me a coffee link in the show notes. Definitely go do that. Not required, but if you're willing to contribute, it will be greatly, greatly appreciated. If you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a rating or review as it helps more people discover the show. And we're trying to get back into the top 200 of tech podcasts on Apple. So if you happen to be listening to this on an Apple device, on Apple Podcasts, please go down there and leave that rating or review. Definitely appreciate it. So thank you guys for supporting another episode of VypDrive. All right, Thinky. Renee Ritchie's not here, but if he was here, I know a question he would want me to ask. So I'm going to ask the question right now. 24 frames per second versus 30 frames per second. Where do you stand, sir? Where do you stand?
All right. All my videos are shot at 30 frames per second.
Ooh, okay.
So it's interesting. Like I like watching content in 24 frames per second. Mm-hmm. But I don't like my content in 24 frames per second for some reason, which I can't really explain. So I like a little bit of added sharpness, a little bit. It's tough. Like I know there are some people who are that like it's super polarizing, right? Like some people are completely on this end, and other people are like, nope.
There are a whole fight on Twitter about that. There are a whole fight on Twitter.
You're dead to me. If you nope, I don't even want to hear it. They're not having the argument. But I shoot at 30 frames per second. My friend's trying to get me to switch to 60. That's not happening. I promise. That's just not nope. Maybe we just start a new trend. We should just get these new cameras and just do everything in 120, just looking ridiculous. We could do that. the A7S III. No, but I'm in the 30
Gotcha.
camp.
I mean, I don't really have a dog in the fight. I shoot all my videos in 24 frames per second because
Okay.
I do talking head stuff, and that's the recommended FPF for talking head videos. So that's what I do. But I don't really. I mean, I have no dog in the fight. And I just thought Renee just popped up out of nowhere. It was not Renee. How you doing, man?
He heard you talking about him. You like goaded him into this.
Right. That 27 make everybody happy. That's right. Let's meet in the middle, right? Let's meet in the middle.
Come on. Oh boy.
Oh.
Oh boy. There you go. It's happening.
Too funny. So my next question to you is autofocus. Who has the better autofocus, Sony or Canon?
Probably Sony now. I mean, probably. Like I really like the changes they made in the A7S III. Just adding all that control. So I mean, you can really dial in. Like, I do think that like on my A7 III and my A6400, there wasn't enough control, so you could pick between like 2 settings and 3 settings depending on what you're choosing there. And like sometimes it would just be too snappy, and it also like wasn't the same between cameras. Like I have different settings for my A6400 and my A7 III. I feel like with Canon, I had more control, and I haven't used an A7S III yet. So, but from what I've seen, I like that level of control, and the eye detection on Sony has been better. It's definitely been better when the person's like farther away from the camera, and I mean, there's no question that that's been better for me. So again, I love to compare the R5 and the R6 and the A7S III and see where it is right now. But eye detection has been Sony for a while. I love the dual pixel autofocus. So it's like, it's interesting to nitpick over here, because one of the questions I ask like is how good is good enough? Like at some point something gets better, but is it like practically better? Is it really making a difference, or are we just picking what's better? I hope that makes sense. Like, even if you could show that something is better, will it actually make a difference for how most people shoot? Is how
That's a good point, especially considering people's budget. I mean, yes, there's better equipment out there, but do you really need the better equipment to achieve the results and the goals that you are trying to set out to achieve? A lot of times, not really.
No, and I mean, I put out a tweet the other day, and I didn't think it would get a reaction. It got a huge reaction. All I said was, if you can't create good content in 1080p, you're not going to be able to create good content in 4K or 8K or 12K.
It's true. You're right.
Like, the resolution is not what's making it better.
Right.
There are advantages to resolution, but it's not what's making your content better. So to sort of piggyback on what you said, I do think that people wait too long sometimes because they're like, oh, I need this camera to start. Like, I gotta have 4K to start. And it's like, no, you're waiting a year. There's so many things you can get better at during that year. You could use your phone. I don't even care. But there's so many things that you can get better at. And I think a lot of people wait too long to start. It's like it needs to be perfect. Where in reality, and some of the things you just can't get better at until you do. You just need those reps. You just need to be on camera. You need to shoot. You need to edit. You need to promote. You need to do research. And there's no point in waiting for like that great camera that's going to make your channel.
Yeah. I think Roberto talks about this all the time, learning how to use the gear that you have before trying to level up and get new gear. Because as you just eloquently stated, the gear is not going to make you better. Your repetition and you getting better at your craft is going to make you better. So I agree with you. I will worry about trying to be the best creator that you can be, and then worry about upgrading to gear later on.
Yeah, and I think like it's another conversation we had that like I heard this comment about Marquez, and someone was saying that like the only reason why his channel is successful is because he's using this amazing gear. And that's so ridiculous. It's Lord. Like so ridiculous. And it discounts like how talented he is. And like, it's just silly to anyone who's actually ever tried to do this. Like the fact that I mean, it wouldn't matter. You could give that same gear to someone else. First of all, they probably wouldn't even know how to use it. It would make it harder for them to create content, and it wouldn't make their content better.
Dude,
So,
Mark can shoot a masterpiece on an iPhone if you gave it to him. Come on now, stop it.
yeah, I mean, I'm not even engaged in that conversation because I feel like if that's your perspective, it's like too far off to like be able to like bridge that gap. And it's
Sure.
like, cool.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. You know the saying, the best camera is the one that you have with you, and smartphone cameras have come a long way. And I know I watch these tech bites. I don't know if you're familiar with the Saturday Night Tech Bite, but I've been watching these tech bites a lot. And I think one of the questions that came up on the tech bite recently is, have smartphone cameras caught up with mirrorless and DSLRs? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how far smartphone cameras have come in comparison to their DSLR and mirrorless counterparts.
All right, so I think that's a really good question, and I would sort of approach it in looking at two different audiences. So for what we do, no, they haven't. I mean, there are just things that you can do on a DSLR or mirrorless camera that you just don't have that level of control with a smartphone. But I'll tell you from what I hear a lot in comment section, for the average user who's going to go take a picture, for them, sometimes a cell phone is even better because the cell phone is doing some computational photography for you. And so a lot of people will say, well, my iPhone will shoot a better picture than this camera that I just bought. Now, given it's because they probably don't know how to use that camera that they just bought, and then they don't know that they'll need to then go and do some post-production work on their image. But if you're just saying just snap, take a picture and share it, I would say for a lot of users, the cell phone, it's like a better tool. It's more limited, of course, but for what most people need, man, click,
Yeah.
and be done. I mean, so that's like those are the two sides
Yeah,
that I look at. What do you think?
I agree with you. I don't think that smartphones have caught up with mirrorless and DSLR cameras. They're getting better every year, obviously, and now we're seeing smartphones that are coming with multiple lenses, so they're giving you more flexibility with what you can do with them. But as far as the amount of features and customization and just sheer image quality that you get on a mirrorless or a DSLR, no, smartphones aren't really that close, not even.
No. And look, the other consideration is like, let's say you're going on vacation. So 100% of the time you're going to have your cell phone with you, right? Like you're not leaving that behind. And so when I look at a camera, I always think like, am I going to bring this with me wherever I go? And that's where, some people ask me for advice about cameras because they're going to go on vacation. And I'm thinking, okay, are you really are you picturing taking this big DSLR with like 3 big lenses with you everywhere you go? And it's not a matter of that you can't. I mean, people have been doing it for years. I just, I try to like help people make a decision that will actually make sense for how they actually use the gear. So, you're going to have your cell phone with you. It's going to be able to take pictures that are pretty good. I think that's a tough choice there. And that's where a lot of the smaller cameras come into play, and you can just throw that in your pocket and go. So, which, is kind of nice. You're kind of getting the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, anything that's portable is always a win. That's why we say, like I was saying earlier, the best camera is the one you have with you. That's why smartphone cameras are such a big thing these days. It's such a big deal because they are literally always on our person. And that's why these manufacturers are striving to make the best smartphone cameras possible, because they know that could be a determining factor in whether or not a potential buyer will buy that phone or not. So
totally. And that extends, beyond cameras. So like I have gimbals in all different sizes, and I mostly use my 2 smallest ones because if I have to think like, do I really want to lug this thing with me on the off chance that I'm going to use it? And if it's small enough, then I'm like, sure, I'll bring it with me. But like, I don't need the extra weight in my backpack, like for the off chance that I'll use it. And sometimes I regret not having it. But again, it's always like a balancing act because I mean, when I go out to shoot, like I can bring 2 bags with me and fill them up with stuff. And now I'm just carrying all, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. So there is like that level of practicality that sort of trickles down into the average user. They're doing it differently with different types of gear. But yeah, if no gear is good, if it's at home on the shelf, it's you're not, that's
There you
pointless,
go.
obviously.
Exactly. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. I have a lot of up and coming creators that watch my content. They watch the podcast or listen to it, things like that. You
Sure.
have been doing a lot of content on your channel recently about the Canon M50. And I hear over and over again about if you're first starting YouTube, that's kind of the camera that you want to kind of take aim at if you really want that camera. The Canon M50 is an excellent starting point for newer creators. What is it about the Canon M50 that makes it so good for new creators, in your opinion? Since, like I said, you have done a lot of content on that particular camera lately.
Okay. So good question. So a couple of things. Like number one, it's super well, let's start with the budget. It's not that expensive. I mean, you can get it for, I think it's like $500 now. Or yeah, 550 maybe. And then you can get it with the kit lens for like an extra $20. So everyone should get the kit lens. You should get the M50 with the kit lens if that's what you're getting. So budget wise, it's, in a good sort of segment there. Then it's super easy to use. So it's got a fully articulating touchscreen. It's got it has dual pixel autofocus, which is awesome. And again, I told you that like I prioritize the actual creative process over specs. So even though the M50 can do 4K, most people won't do 4K with it because you got the crop and you lose dual pixel autofocus. But when I'm thinking of a new creator who's starting out, the fact that they can just flip the screen, put it down, it's going to detect their face, they can hit record and go, that to me is worth a lot. Because again, they can just start creating right away. The color is going to be just fine coming right out of the camera. 1080p looks good. You can still do 1080p 60 and slow it down to 30 or 24 if you want some slow motion. You can't do 120, but again, for most people starting out, that doesn't really make any sense. Or not that it doesn't make any sense, but it's not really a requirement for most people. So it's also super small and light, what we were just talking about. You just throw that thing in your pocket and take it with you anywhere. You got an external mic input, so you can get better audio right into the camera. So for me, it like checks a lot of boxes that I think matter, even though when you compare it to some other cameras, it can't do some of the things that those other cameras can do. Like it can't do 4K and it can't do 120 frames per second, but it can do the things that it does really well, and it's inexpensive. So I think it's a great way to start.
Yeah, I think you make excellent points. Like you said, it's not that expensive. It's like things like you said, $500, something like that. It has the articulating screen, and I know we Sony people have been waiting for one for so long, and we finally get it with the A7S III finally. But yeah, the M50 has the articulating screen, like you said. You could just pretty much turn it on and shoot. And as a new creator, I think that's the most important thing: having something that is very easy to use that gets you right into shooting. I mean, like you said, we were discussing earlier about avoiding as least amount of friction as possible when you're just trying to get into what you're doing as far as creating content, because the easier the workflow is, the more and more content that you can create. And that's the most important thing, creating as much content as you can, especially when you're first starting out, because again, repetition is the father of learning. So the more you do it, the better you get, the more comfortable you get. You begin to develop that on-camera personality and things like that. And then the sky's the limit, but you got to put in the reps.
Absolutely. And see, you brought me back now to the A7S III. Like the fact that they have that fully articulating touchscreen now, and I don't want to discount the fact that they changed the menu system, because
Yeah.
I was not a fan of the old. Like I look at the menu system two ways there on Sony, because I was not a fan of it. Like I think it was not organized well, and features were not in places where I would expect them to be. But I would always tell people it's like a menu system. So once you learn it, you know how to use it. It's not like the end of the world. But now that they made it better, and with the touchscreen and fully articulating, and then that mic input is out of the way so it doesn't impact. Come on. It's like I'm telling you, like Sony listened and they did the things that people actually wanted, and Canon listened.
You know what you got to do, right? You know what you must do.
Oh man, it's trouble.
Your channel is called Take Your Talk. You know what you got to do. I don't know why you holding back. You just go over there to Sony.com, put your pre-order in, or go over to B&H, wherever you got to go. Get the pre-order in, baby. Let's go. Let's go. What you doing? What you waiting for?
I'm gonna tweet a order form at you. Like, okay,
hey,
here.
Let me know. Let me know. I'll be on the lookout. I'll be on the lookout for you. So I'm curious.
You're doing a real soft sell here, but I like it. You're like slowly convincing me that I'm convincing myself. I like it.
Hey, I'm just, you know what? You're the camera dude, and we got probably what might be the perfect camera out there. And you're like hesitating. You better stop hesitating, man. You better get on that. That's like guaranteed views. You better stop playing. So, in the smartphone realm, we have a constant battle: iOS versus Android, iPhone versus Android, this, that, and the other. It seems like, to me anyway, from the outside looking in the camera world, it's Canon versus Sony. That's the big battle everybody talks about in the camera world. But obviously, Canon and Sony aren't the only camera companies out there. You got Panasonic, you got Fuji, you got Nikon, to name a few. Why aren't these companies talked about more in the camera space? Like I said, from where I'm sitting, it's just Canon versus Sony all the time, but nobody talks about Panasonic or Nikon or Fuji that much. I mean, they do, but not as much as Canon and Sony, obviously.
All right. So here, I have a couple of thoughts about that. I think Nikon made the same mistake that Canon did, but they made it worse. So they just waited too long to jump into the mirrorless space. Like, I think that's a mistake both of those companies did. And so what's happening is they're behind a company like Sony that just went all in. Sony has other advantages too. The fact that they have one lens mount is huge over Canon that has like 17 lens mounts. So you're buying these lenses and you can't use them on these cameras. So I think Nikon really dropped the ball. So like with the Z50, the Z6 and the Z7, they're like making their way in now with the Z5. So let's see what happens there. But I think that's what happened initially.
Okay.
Fuji, who's probably, I think, like the most underrated mirrorless camera, in my opinion. Like, I think the X-T3 was awesome, and the X-T4 is awesome. And I mean, they're so powerful. But I don't ever see like good, like, I don't think Fuji marketed it very well, because when you look at what those cameras can actually do at the price that they do it at, it's a crime that not more people are using those cameras. So, and I mean, Fuji's lens system is, I mean, you got everything that you want there. Fuji also didn't really open their lens mount to third-party manufacturers until like recently. So I think now we're starting to see other companies making lenses for Fuji. Hey, Sigma, make those 3 lenses for Fuji. It'd be awesome. We need them. 16, 30, and 56, 1.4. We need them. So yeah, I mean, those are 2 companies that I think sort of dropped the ball there. And I don't know. I mean, Panasonic gets some play, but you're right. I mean, not a lot of people. I mean, people love the GH4 and GH5 for their specs. I mean, those cameras were crazy. Then they complain about the autofocus. Okay. So I don't know, but that's what I think is sort of how we got to where we are right now. But it's interesting to see what happens moving forward, especially with Nikon and Fuji.
Yeah, like you said, Fuji just they had the X-T3 and now they just came out with the X-T4, and it seems like people are enjoying the X-T4. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Fuji in the days, weeks, years to come. Nikon, I haven't heard anything from Nikon lately. I don't know what's going on. And like you said earlier, Panasonic is they're out there, they're doing their thing, but I don't know, they're just not talked about enough with Sony and Canon. Like I said, I'm outside of the camera space. I don't really pay that much attention, but from where I'm standing, it's Sony and Canon, and then there's everybody else from where I'm standing.
So, all right. So, question to you, because like I think you're the perfect person to ask. So, when you went, so you're not in this space, and then you
Right.
had to buy a camera.
Right.
Why'd you pick Sony? Like, how did that come to be?
I am so glad you asked the question. Now, I picked Sony because when I was thinking about getting a camera, all the bigger YouTubers were using the A7 III, and they were waxing poetic about it. They gave it such high praise. I'm like, all right, I'm liking what they're doing. I like the content. I like how it looks. They're saying good things about it. So I want to try that out. I want to see if I can do that. Plus, I think, even though I didn't know at the time that the camera had nothing to do with like the width of the field of the depth of view lens. I thought the full frame camera had something to do with that. So I wanted the A7 III because they get more depth of more field of view. But that has nothing to do with the actual body, but more about the lens. But I didn't know that at the time. So yeah, between all that, I went out and I got the A7 III. But funny story though, I got the A6400 first. I owned that camera for a day. I owned the A6400 for one day, but I got the an opportunity came up the very next day for me to get an A7 III, and I jumped on it, and I have not looked back since.
Like, did you ever use it? Did you even use the A64?
I used the A64 for one night. Yep. Used it for one night. Returned it the next day, got an A7 III, and I haven't looked back.
Okay. Like, so, I mean, but that's like interesting insight, right? Into how you made the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's not so much ads that you see, or it's sort of this that helps influence the
YouTube.
decision.
Yep.
So that's interesting. What lens are you using right now? Because that just looks great.
Woo! Glad you asked it too. So
I don't mean to ask the questions on the podcast, but
cool. Like I said, I'm glad you're asking a question because I'm not the camera expert you are. But this lens, which was actually gifted to me by Jonathan Morrison, is a Sony 24 millimeter f1.4 G master lens. That's
fire.
Blew my mind too. But damn, it's good. It's amazing.
And like lenses are everything, right?
So
that's a huge piece of advice I give people. Like, invest. I'd much rather have you buy a cheaper body and invest in lenses than buy a more expensive body and then use a kit lens. Like the difference in your content is going to be drastic if you buy.
My videos look so much different from when I was using the kit lens. Like, it's like night and day, literally.
Yeah. So good. I mean, that's a really nice setup.
Thank you. Shout out to Kevin Bree for the super chat. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you, man. Yeah, you know me. All I do is grind, man. All I do is grind. So thank you, sir. Thank you.
Double headers, day after day. Just
yeah, Renee says I constantly live on a live stream, more or less. Hey, man, I just enjoy what I do. When you enjoy what you do, it's just you just have fun with it. Just have fun. Woo! Oh man, this is such an awesome conversation. Okay. So once again, I'm a camera noob. I'm an idiot, so I don't really know what is what. So I'm gonna ask you, what is the difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless camera? Because I hear these terms all the time, but I don't know exactly what they mean.
Okay. So basically, in a DSLR, it has a mirror. So the light goes through the lens, and there's literally a mirror that sits in front of the sensor. And so then the image will hit that mirror, go up the camera body, where it'll hit two more mirrors, and then you see it through the optical viewfinder. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, you're literally seeing a reflection of what's in front of the lens. Mm-hmm. It's like real life. So if it's dark, it's going to be dark. And if it's bright, it's going to be bright. It's not changing anything. In a mirrorless camera, obviously mirrorless, so you don't have the mirror. So now that light is hitting the sensor, and you have an electronic viewfinder that's showing you a digital image of what the sensor is seeing. And that's why you can get sort of exposure compensation to happen. You can see a bright image even though it's really dark, because it's actually increasing the brightness of the image. So some of the, and that's why when, another thing is when you look at the bodies, if you look at a mirrorless body, it's a lot thinner because you don't need room. If you think of a mirror sitting at a 45-degree angle, it takes up a lot of space. So the actual body needs to be deeper just to house that mirror. Whereas mirrorless, you open it up, that sensor is like right there, right? You take off your lens, that sensor is like right there.
Yep.
So that's the difference between the two.
So,
And go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, so what is the advantage of one over the other?
So I would say that in the beginning, the electronic viewfinders sucked. Like they weren't very good. So people like appreciated the optical viewfinder. And it also like it gave you a sense of like actually being there because you're seeing it and it's like real. You're not seeing a video of what's in front of you. You're actually seeing what's in front of you. Nowadays, I don't really have advantages that are significant enough for a DSLR because the advantages of using an electronic viewfinder is that you can use the same autofocus system that the LCD uses. So let's compare like two sort of comparable cameras, like entry-level cameras from Canon. So we'll take an SL2, which is a DSLR, and the M50 that we talked about. So the SL2 has 9 autofocus points when you're using the optical viewfinder. That's it. 1 in the middle, 2, 2, 1. The M50 has, depending on what lens you're using, like 143 autofocus points. So that's 1, like literally just placing the autofocus point where you want. Number 2, the M50 could do face tracking and eye detection through the viewfinder, just like it can do when you're using the LCD. But on the SL2, you can't because you only have those 9 autofocus points. Another advantage for a mirrorless camera is that it will actually show you the exposure, what your picture is going to look like before you take it. So if it looks dark through the viewfinder and I open up the aperture, it's actually going to make my image brighter. And so I can actually see what it's going to look like before I take the picture. With an optical viewfinder, you're just seeing what's in front of you. It doesn't matter when you're changing the settings. It doesn't do anything to the image that you're seeing because it's just a reflection of what's in front of the camera. So, I mean, at this point, I would go mirrorless all the time.
Interesting. So, do you think that eventually DSLR will be phased out, or will they always have their place?
I mean, I think eventually they're going to be phased out. I know, like, I can't believe that they're still selling as well as they are, but they are. I mean, I have friends that work in camera stores, so they are selling. It'll just be interesting to see for how much longer, because I wonder if it's people who are using DSLR who are upgrading to a better DSLR versus like new users who are just going to get a mirrorless camera. So, I mean, you know, that sort of trajectory, it's always longer than you think for something to be phased out. But
Right.
ultimately, you're going to look at you know, companies like Canon, and they're going to say, is it worth us making this camera? So like the 90D sold really well, which was shocking to me. And I was thinking, I couldn't believe they came out with another DSLR and it sold really well. And now there's the T8i. And so they're obviously selling them. So, you know, somewhat surprisingly to me.
So, is the 90D the most recent DSLR that has been on the sold in, or what's the most recent one out there?
It's the T8i.
The TAI.
Yeah. And the 90D is a great camera. I loved using it. Like as soon as I picked it up, it's, you know, it was bigger. It just felt great. All my lenses fit on it without an adapter. So I really liked it. It had great feature, you know, uncropped 4K for an APS-C sensor. It's got dual pixel autofocus in 4K. So it's a really nice camera. And at the same time, like the M6 Mark II came out with virtually identical specs, except for it didn't have a built-in viewfinder. You had to use like an optional one that you like put on the hot shoe. And I don't think it's sold necessarily very well, which again that was interesting to me. Because I have an M6 Mark II. I love my M6 Mark II. It's great.
Okay. Okay. How much do you know about external recorders?
About internal recorders?
Oh, external.
External recorders? I have an Atomos Ninja 5.
Ah, perfect. I was about to ask you about that.
Okay.
So, obviously, I have a Sony A7 III, which does not have an articulating screen. So, when I'm shooting my videos, I have to use the Sony imaging app to act as an external monitor so I can see what's going on. But I know a lot of people use something like the Atomos Ninja 5. So I'm curious, besides being an additional monitor, I know the Atomos Ninja 5 has a bunch of different other features. So why do people use that device so much, besides the fact that it's an external recorder, HD monitor, or monitor, whatever? What makes that device in particular so good?
Okay, so a couple of things. It's that specific one. So we can talk about why people use external recorders and why they use that one. So like, first of all, the Atomos Ninja 5 I think it's super affordable at $500 for what it can do. Now, in your specific situation, there are some issues because you're going to lose face detection when you use an external monitor. When you record, no, I'm sorry, you won't lose it. You would have an issue if you try to use an external monitor but not record externally. You'd lose face detection on your A7 III.
Right.
But with the external recorder, it'll be fine. So that's super powerful. Now, one other reason to use an external recorder is, for example, when I was using my M6 Mark II for a few of my videos to see how it'll work. Well, it's got a 30-minute record limit. So every 30 minutes, it's going to shut off. When I record externally, it's not really recording in the camera. It's just passing the signal. So I can record for as long as I have battery on the camera and for as long as I have space on my SSD on the external recorder. You also talked about it's also like a beautiful monitor. It's like the color on it is amazing. It's sharp. It's beautiful. So that's another advantage, and it's bigger than the LCD on the back. And then in terms of like exposure, like there are waveforms on it. Like there are more ways to correct your exposure or to expose your image than a lot of the lower end cameras will have. It almost gives you like cinema camera features for exposure that are nice to have. And some external monitors will do that as well. But like I really like my Atomos Ninja 5. And then for you, like, do you ever run into the 30-minute limit? Is that ever an issue for you or not really?
Very rarely. I think in the a year and a half or 2 years I've had the camera, I maybe run into it maybe twice.
Okay. So then I wonder, like, and you can also like record in ProRes on it. So again, there are other reasons why someone might do that. But then I wonder, like, for you, is there enough of an advantage to justify the cost?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like your current workflow is suffering. So like,
No.
again, and I know we're sort of going in circles about this, but like I for the most part only justify upgrading when it's going to make my creative process easier, when it's going to save me time, right? Because like if I bought something that saves me like a half hour every time I shoot a video, well, over the course of a year, that's like saving me days. So, so that's a reason to invest. And I don't discount the fact that like I like gear. So some people, right? Like you just want something new, like that's cool. But just be aware that that's why you're buying it. That's cool. I'm not judging it. So I think like, and I also look at like, for the most part, we all have like limited budgets, right? Like we can't just go buy everything we want. So then I think like, okay, if someone's going to spend $800, is that where they should spend it? Versus like like, look at how perfectly you're lit, right? Like, you have good lighting, you have good audio. I think those two things are super important, and I think
Oh,
those are underrated. So,
definitely.
for example, right? So, like, I think resolution is overrated, and I think audio and lighting is underrated. But
Audio is probably the most important thing when it comes to video. I think people don't realize, especially when they're first starting out, how important audio is. I didn't. In my first 6 and 7 months of doing YouTube, I recorded all my video using the internal mic on my iPad Pro because I was recording the filming on my iPad Pro. So it wasn't until I got a DM from a friend that they told me, like, dude, you need to do something about your audio because it needs to be upgraded. So I went out and I brought a Blue Yeti and then went from there. But yeah, audio is so important.
yeah, I mean, and your audio now is so clean, but like for sure, right? I mean, because I think that there's so much emphasis on like how things look, and it's just like people sort of overlook that, and they
Yeah.
forget that people also listen, and that like I think we've talked about this. Like, I'm much more likely to turn a video off if the audio is bad
Yep.
than the image quality. Like, if
Yep.
it's bad and there's like just the noise floor is high, or I can hear all this background noise, I can't sit there and listen to someone for 30 minutes with like super distracting audio. And a lot of times, depending on the type of content, I might not even watch the video. I'm just listening to it.
I
So
don't even
now,
know people in my live stream with background noise. They can't even come in my live stream. They got background noise. So I know how you feel.
yeah. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. Audio, like, and look, and all of those are like just black holes, right? You can go to the extreme with everything. But I think
Oh yeah.
if you get your audio to the point where it's not distracting, you that someone doesn't notice your audio, you're already doing okay.
There you go.
It just can't be something that they notice. They can't just be like, "What is that?" That just can't happen. So, yeah, that's a lighting, audio, and, like, essentially, any microphone is better than the built-in microphone. Like,
Yeah.
a $20 plug-in lavalier mic off of Amazon is gonna be way better than the built-in microphone on all the cameras.
True story. Yep.
Get one.
No doubt. Before we get you out of here, speaking of microphones, I see you did a video on the new Elgato Wave 3. So talk to us about your experience with the Wave 3.
So that was like a really interesting product. I just still think it's interesting. So what they did, like, the microphone is good. It's not the best USB microphone I've used. It's good. But
Mm-hmm.
what they did that was super interesting is they incorporated this software with it
Yep.
that is extremely powerful. And I remember talking to them, like, because I got a pre-production model of it, and I remember being like, "Are you going to sell this software on its own?" And they were like, "Nope." So in order to use this like super powerful, I mean, you have to watch the video because it can do so much. The software can do so much and make life so much easier for streamers. But then you have to use one of their mics. So that was like a brilliant. And as soon as I published the video, and you look at the comments, people are like, "Well, can I use this software with my mic?" And it's like, "Nope." And do you think they're going to sell it? I'm like, "Nope." No. So I mean, the fact that you can bring in like 8 channels, and like, it's so easy. It's like, I mean, the interface is so simple that that's going to be interesting to see where that goes. If other companies are going to start selling their mics, some companies already do, but they really, I feel like Elgato is doing that really well. They're really understanding what their consumers want, and they're creating these products that solve specific pain points for them. So
Yeah.
I think that's really smart by them.
Elgato is really tapped into the streaming community. So they have direct connection with the streaming community. So, like you said, they can figure out what streamers want, what streamers need, and then they can incorporate that into the product, like that software into that mic. I mean, there is a feature of that mic where if I want to amplify my voice, there is a compression thing in there where it will not make sure I peak. It's crazy. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard limiter, and it's, again, it's one of those things where, like, you may not think of it, and you can buy a really nice USB mic that doesn't have that, and yes, you can add that in software, but the fact that they made everything so easy,
Yep.
it's like, again, just make it simpler on the user. So I really think that, well, I don't know because I don't talk to them before they make the product, but it really looks like they're listening to their audience, and then that's how they're developing the products, which is, I mean, as a user, it'd be awesome.
That's the best way to be. That is the best way to be.
No doubt.
But Sagi, Tech Gear Talk. Thank you for the conversation, man. I appreciate you.
It was tons of fun. That was tons of fun. I'm so glad we did this.
I am too. I learned so much on this podcast. Before we get out of here, though, let the people know where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. I'm Tech Gear Talk, and YouTube, obviously. Tech Gear Talk on all of them.
No doubt. And if you guys want to go check out his YouTube channel, just pasted the link in the chat. So check him out. There he is. Shout out to those of y'all that watched the podcast live today. Thank you so much for listening or watching another episode of VypDrive, I should say. Thank you. If you took the time to super chat or buy me a coffee and all that good stuff, I appreciate you guys supporting me each and every episode. So thank you for hanging out with me and Sagi. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Man, have an awesome night.
Absolutely. Shout out to those of y'all that are listening on audio only. Thank you for listening to another episode of VypDrive. I appreciate you guys rocking out each and every week on the podcast. If you want to go down there and check Sagi content, Tech Gear Talk, the link will be in the show notes. So definitely go down there and check him out, especially if you want to learn about camera gear. As you just heard in the podcast, the dude knows his stuff. He is legit. If you want to support or donate to the podcast, there should be a buy me a coffee link in the show notes. Not required, but if you're willing to contribute, that will be greatly appreciated. So thank you guys so much. But if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving that rating or review so we can get more people discovering the show, get the show back into the top 200 of tech podcasts, all that good stuff. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving that rating or review. And thank you for listening to another episode of VypDrive. For those of y'all that like to watch the podcast live, we will be back tomorrow night. We're going to be back late tomorrow night because, like I said earlier, I'm hosting the Painfully Honest Tech podcast tomorrow night. But after that's done, VypDrive will be live at about 10:30 tomorrow night Eastern Standard Time, and we are welcoming BMAC to the podcast, so that should be a good episode. So yeah, that's when VypDrive will be back tomorrow night. But yeah, that's about it. But until the next time, people, this your boy Viper, the man about tech. You know where to find me. So come back for more.